Hey bakers, it's DT. I'm a recipe developer in the King Arthur Test Kitchen, and today I'm going to walk you through how to make my very own semolina pasta recipe, which you can find on our website or at the link down below. All right, so the first thing I'll measure is the semolina flour, which I will go ahead and measure directly out of the bag and into the bowl. The good news is I'm using a scale, so I'll get an accurate measurement every time. Today we're looking for 285 grams of semolina flour. All right, semolina's in. We're gonna switch over to the double O pizza flour. Need 87 grams of that. Double O pizza flour is a great ingredient here. It's not just for pizza. It's good for pasta here because it has natural elasticity, which brings a little bit of chew to the pasta, which I really like. So that's the last of the double O flour. Next, I'm gonna add a half a teaspoon of table salt. Then I'll just use my fork here, get things started. I like to whisk the two flours together so that you can sort of work out some of the lumps that might be in the flour, but also make sure that they're nice and evenly mixed, and to make sure that salt is well distributed also. All right, that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and get the scale out of the way and pour my pasta flour mixture directly onto the board. Now the whole goal here is to make a well out of the flour so that you can put your eggs and water mixture into it. So I'm just gonna use the bottom of this bowl to make the well. Yeah, so if you do not want to mix your pasta on the counter, you can always do this in a food processor. A lot of times you'll see folks making pasta and they will crack the eggs directly into the flour mixture. I like to go ahead and crack them into a separate bowl because I can scramble them here first. It gives me less of an opportunity to make a big mess when I'm mixing the pasta together. So the recipe has you start with 3 tablespoons of water. I'm gonna go ahead and get 3 into the eggs directly. And now I have more water standing by just in case I need to add it later. But for now, I'm gonna start with the lower amount. Let's go ahead and scramble these eggs. All right, so the eggs are all mixed up, and then I'm gonna go ahead and get that into the well that we created. Now the note on the water here is that flour has a tendency to absorb moisture from the air. And by starting with the lower amount of water in the recipe, I can always add up if I need to hydrate the pasta a little bit better. All right, so this is kind of the fun part, and you take your fork that you were working with, and you start mixing it around. The goal here is to slowly drag the flour mixture into the egg mixture, little by little, and hopefully not overflow your little mountain or volcano of pasta. You can see that the pasta is really taking on a yellow color from both the egg yolks and also the semolina flour. So you can see that my fork is starting to get a little gummed up. So I can tell that it's time to go ahead and move on from the fork and to the bench scrape. Once again, we're trying to mix the flour into the wet mixture. This is gonna take about a minute or two. I think this is a good pasta recipe for someone who's new to pasta because it's gonna deliver a very flavorful result at the end of the day because of the mixture of the two flours and the eggs. But at the same time, it's very easy to pull together. As you saw, I don't need any special equipment to mix the dough. I have the option, but I can absolutely do it here on the counter by hand. And then once you've mastered this technique, you can apply it to any pasta dough. So I'd say it's a really good beginner-friendly pasta recipe. So remember when we left out some of the water earlier in the mixture? As you can see, there's still sort of like crumbly bits here. There's some dry flour underneath. I'm gonna go ahead and start adding a little bit more of the extra water that I set aside to help hydrate that and bring the dough together. I'm gonna go about half a tablespoon at a time. That's probably all the water I'm actually gonna need today. But since the dough is still like pretty, I guess, crumbly at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and just sort of sprinkle that water over the surface and then go back in with the bench knife and continue mixing it together. So you can see at this point, we are at a pretty cohesive mixture. There's a little bit of dry powder, but we're gonna work that in during the kneading process, so we don't have to worry about that at all. This is good enough for us to go ahead and start kneading. I'm gonna start saying funny things and laughing at myself so Tucker can use these for outtakes later on. So it's time to start kneading. I'm gonna go ahead and start sort of folding the pasta up on itself this way, and then pushing away from me. And then from there, I can sort of grab it, turn it 90 degrees, and then fold it back up on itself again. This is a bit of a workout. It takes some time, and it's a great opportunity to get to know your pasta dough really well. And of course, the purpose here is to mix all the ingredients together, but also to really get that flour starting to hydrate so that we have a nice tender pasta in the end. So what you're looking for is sort of a smooth surface that is bouncy to the touch. And so that's what we're gonna aim for as we wrap this process up. All right, so we're coming toward the end of the kneading process. And as mentioned, as promised, there's a nice smooth dough. And if I give it a little press, it really sort of bounces back. And that's because of the gluten development that I have created in this dough with all the kneading. So I'm gonna go ahead and press this into about a 1-inch disc. The size at this point is not important. We're just gonna wrap it in plastic and leave it at room temperature for 30 minutes. Okay, so with the pasta unwrapped, I'm gonna go ahead and divide it into 4 pieces so that I can essentially just make them smaller. And that way I can keep the part that I'm not working with set aside for now. And what I'll do is actually wrap it in a little bit of plastic so that it stays nice and moist. If I were to leave it sitting out at room temperature like this and exposed, then it would dry out. And we don't want that because that causes the pasta to crack when we're shaping it. So with that set aside, I'll go ahead and start working with the piece of dough that I have here. As you can see, it's not sticky, right? It's well hydrated, so I don't really need a whole lot of bench flour or any at all, right? So I have some standing by, but I'm not necessarily gonna use it. So when we unwrapped the pasta, it was about 1 inch thick, and it's gotta go through this roller in the pasta machine. So even though I'm at the widest setting, I do want to go ahead and flatten it just a little bit, just to give it the best chance possible of fitting through there. Now we have our pasta, we're gonna start feeding it through the machine. Again, I'm at the widest setting, which on this Atlas 150 is 0. It's a little counterintuitive that the widest setting is the smallest number, but it is. All right, so we've got the pasta through the roller 1 time, and now I'm gonna go ahead and fold it in trifold, like a business letter. And that's gonna help square up the shape a little bit and make it more manageable for me as I'm continuing to roll it through. So what I'll do is I'll send the sort of open end of the business letter through the machine, but I'm gonna do it upside down. So it sort of reinforces that fold for you, if you will. So what I'll do from here is continue to decrease the setting on the pasta machine until I get all the way to number 7 on this machine to make noodles. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is make some noodles with the machine. So in order to get started, the real first step is to make a landing pad for the pasta. And that is essentially just a parchment-lined baking sheet that I'm gonna put a little bit of semolina on. And once the noodles come out of the machine, they're gonna rest in this bed of semolina, which is gonna help, again, sort of draw a little bit of moisture out of the pasta, let them dry a little bit, which is kind of nice. But it also means the noodles are not gonna stick together. So I'm gonna go ahead and lop off that rounded edge. All I'm gonna do is sort of tuck it under my other pasta that's resting over here, and I can roll it up into the next piece of dough when I am sheeting it through. All right, so I'm going for 12-inch lengths, and the good news about this bench knife is that it's 6 inches long. So I can sort of give myself a little bit of a guide here, and then slice my noodle at 12 inches. 6 inches. 6 inches. Okay, so now it's time to turn the long strips of pasta into fettuccine noodles. And in order to do that, we will add the fettuccine attachment to the Atlas 150 machine. It really just slides right onto the side. And now it's time to go ahead and start feeding it through. Now we set up our landing pad a little bit earlier so that I could go directly from the machine into the semolina, and that was on purpose. We want the semolina waiting for us, not the other way around. So we have our little nests of pasta ready to go. But the great news about this recipe is that it's pretty versatile. And when I wrote it, that was what I had in mind. So what I'll do next is turn one of these other pieces of dough into little bow tie pastas, and I'm gonna show you how to do it. All right, so farfalle, or bow tie pasta. begins as a rectangle. And I'm gonna go ahead and trim this pasta sheet into a manageable rectangle just to get myself started. So trimming off the edge, you remember what to do with this. Tuck it under your dough for later. And then I'm gonna trim up this edge as well. Tuck it under for later. And then these little dried edges along the pasta are going to end up cracking and being unsightly when it's time to make the dough. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim those off before I get started. So I'm gonna just eyeball a 2-inch slice all the way down the length. Again, the exact size of your pasta here is not as important as the fact that they're all similar sizes, so they cook the right same rate. Okay, time to start making the farfalle. I'm just gonna go ahead and start here on the one end. And this is a fun little technique. It's sort of an extra bonus, right? It's not in the recipe, but this is what you get for watching the YouTube video. So I'm gonna go ahead and fold the pasta sort of towards the center using my pointer fingers and sort of touching them right there in the middle. And then I'm going to fold back this side and pinch it with my thumbs. The beautiful thing about fresh pasta is that you can cook it right away, and it's actually at its peak at that point. And if you are in a situation where you feel like you can't eat it right now or you can't cook it tonight, you can always freeze it. All right, so that's the last of the pasta shapes. And what I'm gonna do now is clear up my station a little bit, get some water boiling so that I can cook this pasta. You wanna salt your water after it boils rather than before it boils, because if it's in there before it starts boiling, it concentrates too much and it gets too salty. So lots of salt for all this water. It's about 4 quarts in here. Salt in. And now I'm just going to drop the pasta in one nest at a time. You can see it's a little bit clumped together, so the reason for going in one at a time is so that I can go in between, use my tongs, and sort of zhuzh it around a little bit to make sure that the noodles aren't sticking to themselves or to the bottom of the pot. So it's been about 2 to 4 minutes, and I'm just gonna pull one of these noodles out to taste it to make sure it is at the texture that I like. Oh, great, perfect. Good, yeah. I like it just a little bit springy, which is great because it gets that anyway from the double O flour, but there's still a little tootsomeness from that semolina. So I'm gonna move the pasta into this bowl. I like to use tongs for this purpose because it allows me to move the pasta and still retain the pasta water. Pasta water is actually a pretty valuable commodity. If you're ever making like a really thick sauce for pasta, you can always thin it back out with the pasta water. Because it's been really heavily seasoned already, we don't have to worry about it sort of interfering with the seasoning of a sauce. So we have a little bit of our garlic oil, a little bit of the red pepper flakes, and then a little bit of parsley, a little fresh herb. All right, and just to finish this up, I'm gonna shower it with some parm. Now it's time to eat. Yep. You definitely want to take the time to slow down, make your pasta at home from scratch. This is a great beginner-friendly recipe. I think you should keep it simple, a little bit of oil, a little bit of herbs, a little bit of red bell pepper flakes, and you've got a great meal. Enjoy, happy baking.